Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm doing my favorite poem project about a poem called Sometimes the Words Are So Close by Julia Alvarez. Sometimes the words are so close, I am more who I am when I'm down on paper than anywhere else. As if my life were practicing for the real me, I become unbuttoned from the anecdotal and unnecessary, and undressed down to the figure of the poem, line by line. The real text a child could understand. Why do I get confused living it through? Those of you lost and yearning to be free, who hear these words, take heart from me. I was once in as many drafts as you, but briefly, essentially, here I am. Who touches this poem touches a woman. The speaker of this poem is a woman who is attempting to comfort others, probably younger than her, who feel like they haven't found themselves yet, and she does so by explaining the implications of writing in her own growth. This poem can be read in two parts. To use the poet's language choice and imagery choice, the first half of the poem almost strips sentences of grammar or punctuation in order to reveal both the words, the form, and the speaker in their most naked forms. This was most likely done in an attempt to show the speaker's closeness to herself, the lack of need for external factors such as punctuation. It all just feels like a very raw stream of consciousness, closeness to thought that she's trying to depict. So in addition to the form, the word choice in the poem is very evocative of this nudity or being stripped. And for example, the words unbuttoned from the anecdotal and unnecessary, first of all, unbuttoned as a vocabulary choice in order to evoke this sense of nudity, is also communicating with the second half by possibly attacking punctuation. It's something that we only use in order to understand each other. It's not something that we need in order to understand ourselves, as the poet or the speaker has made clear by stating that she understands herself without punctuation, without the need of the anecdotal and unnecessary. The speaker also says undressed down to the figure of the poem. Now we know that undressed and figure are also words that can be added to our list of nude vocabulary. Now there's a clear mood change in the second half of the poem when a rhyme pattern and punctuation are introduced. And this second half starts at the line, the real text a child could understand. Now this, one, suggests that the rest of the poem is going to be real text. The mention of children is also used most likely to direct the second half, the real text, at a child or a younger figure. Those of you lost and yearning to be free, who hear these words, take heart from me. That, again, is calling out to people who possibly haven't found themselves yet. Well, she's calling to people who understand these words, to people who understand punctuation, to real text. The speaker goes on to say, I was once in as many drafts as you, but briefly, essentially, here I am. It's a reference back to these drafts, or this rawness that we've seen in the first half. And it also refers back to her use of writing specifically as a means of finding herself. There's imagery that specifically emphasizes writing as a means to self-discovery. Now, saying that you're coming in drafts and then becoming a final product, that is aligning the speaker with art itself, or the poem itself, which is something to be celebrated. It's saying we're all art and that we all come in drafts, but that the final product is something to be celebrated, which is interesting because it's clear that the poet wanted to publish a naked state and a presentable state, and that she thinks that the naked state is also something to be celebrated, that it's something worth publishing, that it's the celebration of the self as an art. Now, when I first read this poem, I didn't quite understand the last line, who touches this poem touches a woman. That confused me, and I had to read it through to understand what Julia Alvarez could possibly be getting at. Of course, if she's ending a poem this way, she had to be making a statement. It had to be tying back to that. That was the last thought you'd be having after reading her poem. So basically, when reread, this poem is very clearly making a statement about social barriers that are put on women. Who the speaker wants to be and who she is is not as contrived, as anecdotal, as unnecessary as possibly a social construct is putting on her. Specifically that writing on paper, as that is the clear theme in the poem, is a means of finding that freedom within yourself. The second half of the poem can then be interpreted as her reaching out to people who haven't yet found that freedom. The second half of the poem is directed at children, and then we can further interpret this to be young girls who have only found themselves under a social construction. And that, in this case, would be represented by the punctuation and rhyme scheme, the pattern that's been put on girls and then on the poem. She's speaking to girls who haven't yet had this enlightenment in a way that they can understand. As I've stated previously, punctuation is only really created by humans so that we can understand each other. The poet Julia Alvarez has done a lot of work on cultural expectation, and she's very interested in how social situations have impacted women. She feels there's a large pressure on women to be a certain way. And then we see that she finishes the poem, who touches this poem touches a woman, further associating her with a piece of art, but extending that to all women, saying that women are an art piece. They come, she says in drafts, this could be seen as maybe a symbol of adversity, that what we've gone through, this social construct, this social pressure, is also worth celebrating, as she's put the adversity into the poem as well. She's put her stream of consciousness, her rawness, into the poem. She feels it's necessary to reach out to other young girls who want to grow into themselves. And by including this first stream of consciousness half, she's saying that all the drafts are worth celebrating just as much as the final product is, just as much as the woman and the art is. I definitely feel a huge connection to this poem. The first time I read it, it stuck out to me more than any other. First of all, just because of the first few lines. Sometimes the words are so close, I am more who I am when I'm down on paper than anywhere else. Something that I feel, whether it's in dance, for example, or in writing, is that I am my most ultimate self when I'm doing those things. So in some ways, I connect strongly to the first half of the poem in the sense that I feel like I'm at a place where I don't have to use, like, figuratively, I don't have to use punctuation. I have so many books of just writing and writing and writing of stream of consciousness that when I read those words, those first few words, I saw myself in them, and I saw myself reflected in somebody else's work, and I feel like that's special, to be able to see yourself in somebody else's art. And as Julia Alvarez has framed this poem, she is the art. She is something that is worth celebrating, that is worth publishing. All these books behind me, I read them and I feel like I'm in somebody else's brain. It's so exciting to be able to see somebody else and see them as their art. When I'm dancing, I feel like I'm showing me. I don't feel like I'm showing technique. I don't feel like I'm showing movement or choreography. I feel like I'm presenting to myself, and that's why people are affected by it, because they're affected by me. And that's the way I feel when I'm reading this poem. I see her in it, and I'm so happy that she aligned herself with the art, that she made herself the poem. She is the poem. I am my writing. I am my dancing. That's me. And I'm glad that other people feel that way. The nuanced femininity in this I find so interesting, because it's such a small part of it, and you don't have to see it that way. But when you do see it that way, it feels perfect. It feels like the amount that femininity is sewn into this poem is the amount that I feel like it's currently being sewn into my life. And as I become a stronger human, I become a stronger woman. And though becoming a strong woman isn't at the forefront of my mind, it's something that's coming with me. And as I become myself, I'm breaking down these walls that society has put on women, and I'm redefining my own type of femininity. And that's what I think Julia Alvarez is doing in this poem. This poem was made for girls like me, and was meant for girls like me to read, to remind us that as we go through our drafts, and that those drafts are worth celebrating, that we will get somewhere, where we can be with ourselves without anything that needs other people to understand it. I'm glad that other people will one day be able to read my work or see my work, and they'll be able to see me, and they'll be able to see me as a woman and as a piece of art and as a human.